we crank it up for a minute?
I promise to live, promise to love myself. And when I'm down, reach out for help, and I'll be there to share all I can give. Promise to live. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I promise. Whoa, and when the world is hard to bear,
Excited about this song. We'll be playing it.
remember I'm enough and others care. And in the darkness,
Let us finish playing it.
I know I can make it through. Standing strong with hope for tomorrow. I promise to live, promise to love myself. And when I'm down, reach out for help, and I'll be there to share all I can give. Promise to live.
We have a guitar solo that's ending. Let's play the air guitar. This is great.
Promise to love myself. And when I'm down,
Do what? Reach out for help.
and I'll be there to share
All I can
all I
give.
can give. Promise to live. Promise to
Promise.
live. Promise to love myself. And when I'm down, reach out for help, and I'll be there to share all I can give. Promise to live.
We got Bree Ray. You guys recognize her voice? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. It's amazing. I love that song. Welcome, welcome, everybody. I am so thankful to have you here today. My name is Brandy Vega, the founder of Promise to Live, and we're thrilled to have you. Today we're talking about burnout. But before we get started, we've got some amazing speakers today. We want to give a shout out to our pizza. Did you guys enjoy the pizza? Yes. It was really good, wasn't it? That's from Rock Creek Pizza in American Fork. So, make sure you thank the people who help support us. I have Ray Smithson. Come on up, Ray. Ray, some of you guys might know Ray. I want to give Ray just a moment to talk, because part of the reason I scheduled the Promise to Live Silicon Slopes monthly mental health town halls every third Thursday was so that we could do this from noon to 2, and then he's got an incredible event he does monthly every third Thursday from 3 to 5. And I love what he's doing, and I think it's really important that in our communities we create communities of collaboration and support. That's a big part of it. So why don't you share what you do?
Okay, and let's first have another big round of applause for Brandy. She's amazing. It's incredible to see what she's built, and that song was fantastic. That was amazing. And like what Brandy said, so the event is actually called the Third Thursday at 3 pitch event. So it's every third Thursday of the month at 3 p.m. at Kiln headquarters in Lehigh, and it's partnered with Connect Capital. Connect Capital is a nonprofit organization that takes founders, surrounds them with mentors, and gives them feedback on their pitch, their business model, different types of education. So it's incredible to have another amazing nonprofit organization supporting. So it's just it's great to see what Brandy's doing, and you're very welcome to come over to Third Thursday. It's exactly a 3-minute drive away. Who's been to Kiln headquarters in Lehigh? Okay, it's really close. Just search Kiln. There's Kiln 1 and Kiln 2. Go to Kiln 1 in the theater. But it's always awesome to see Brandy show up. She's been to quite a few of them, and she's brought some of her friends over. So you're more than welcome to come watch. There will be 4 startups presenting and one venture capital firm presenting, and then there will be charcuterie and networking. So it's pretty simple, but welcome to come, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ray. Ray is a great partner in the community, especially for Silicon Slopes and for startups, and he's just done great things. So go, it's super fun. Even if you're not pitching, you can learn a lot. It's like watching kind of live Shark Tank, and who doesn't love that? I'm guessing if you're in here, you like Shark Tank? No? All right, and then we want to thank our sponsor, Tom Telford with Levo. Levo is an incredible company. I'm gonna let him just take a few minutes off the top. When he gets done, we're gonna turn the time over to Dr. David Morgan, who's the Director of Mental Health Awareness for Silicon Slopes. So we will start with you, sir.
Thank you, Brandy. Appreciate this. I'm Tom Telford with Levo. It's always a pleasure to be here. I have so much respect for Brandy and Promise to Live. When you own a business that is in the mental health industry, you hear these stories daily. I get news almost daily, as does several other organizations who are in the mental health space. And what I mean by stories is people who are done. They're tired, they're exhausted, which is an awesome topic of the day. How does burnout lead to mental health and the spiral that occurs in people's lives when they're fatigued mentally, emotionally, and we need better tools. Levo is an organization that is an assessment, diagnosis, and ongoing medication management company. So there are hundreds of therapists, primary care providers throughout the state who refer their clients to Levo when there is a need for the potential for medication management, ADHD testing, all sorts of other mental health needs. Levo is collaboratively working with therapists and other professionals for and in behalf of the individual. So in a given day, we have hundreds of people going through Levo offices, and they're typically referred there by other mental health professionals. My family has been impacted individually on a personal level by mental health stories. I have one, which is why we started. I'm married to a therapist, and so in any given day, I'm in therapy for a number of reasons. And I do want it. I can tell you, I get asked by friends all the time, what's it like being married to a therapist? And I said, it is a gift to be married to a mental health professional. I spent 25 years in institutional finance. The mental health space is relatively new to me personally, but I've benefited greatly, especially from this topic. Even though I own a mental health company, I'm an entrepreneur. And guess what? It's friggin' heavy. It is not easy to do this stuff. If you're in mental health today, you know there are long hours, long days, long weeks, and guess what? There's no end to the line of people who need help. So mental health professionals themselves need what is going to be talked about today. These are the tools that literally are saving the lives of the mental health professionals who are holding the bag for the rest of us in society. So this stuff is important, and I'm grateful that Levo can be involved. Thank you for being here. It was rainy. I'm stoked about it because the slopes are coming, and that's my life. I live by Snow Basin Ski Resort, and I can tell you that I woke up stoked because in a few months, I'm going to be on the slopes again. So thanks for being here. Thank you.
And now we have Dr. David Morgan, a licensed psychologist. Yep. And?
Not that slide. Yes, that slide. Hi, everyone. Welcome again. I'm Dr. Morgan. I'm a licensed psychologist and the Director of Mental Health Awareness here at Silicon Slopes, and wanted to start off today by talking a little bit about some of the clinical aspects of burnout. So if you can advance the slide there. So this is from the American Psychological Association. Their definition. There's different definitions. This one isn't the one, but I'm a psychologist, so I chose this one. Physical, emotional, or mental exhaustion accompanied by decreased motivation, lowered performance, and negative attitudes towards oneself and others. Now, if you look at that, you're going to say, well, that sounds a lot like depression as well, right? Those two things. There's a difference between burnout and depression, and I want to cover that before the rest of the speakers talk today. So let's go to the next slide. And then one more. Okay. So burnout, so the first one is going to be burnout, the second one is depression. Burnout is a recognized condition. Obviously, the APA has a definition for it. Lots of people have definitions for it, and it's something that we realize is a thing. Major depressive disorder, or some of the other depression issues, are diagnosable conditions. Burnout, you're not going to find burnout in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It's not in there, but you will find major depressive disorder or persistent depressive disorder or some of the other conditions that are listed there. So there's a difference between the two. You can be burnt out and not depressed. If you're depressed, you're probably going to be burnt out as well, I would imagine. I think it might not go the other way. So one is diagnosable, one is not. Second is specific versus global, and let me explain what I mean by that. Burnout is like if you're burned out on your job or on a relationship or on a certain task, if you get into something different, then the burnout usually ends. Okay? Like if your job is terrible and you don't like it and you're burned out on it, and then you go 2 weeks to Maui, you're going to feel great for 2 weeks in Maui, right? Because you're going to be away from your job. It's going to feel different. It's specific to a situation. Depression, clinical depression is global. You can go to 2 weeks in Maui when you're depressed, and you're still depressed in Maui. You still feel the same way. So it's a much more pervasive condition that doesn't lend itself to kind of the quick fix of just change your circumstance. So that's another difference. And then different responses to changes in circumstance and environment. Again, if you are burnt out, you can do small things that will have an immediate change. Depression, you can do small things, they're not going to have an immediate change. Depression takes time to change. It often takes medication, it almost always takes therapy. What they found is that if you are depressed, medication is great. Medication alone typically does not do the trick. You have to change the way you think. You have to get in and talk with someone about it. You have to do the thought work that's accompanied with that in order to make significant changes. You do that over time, and medication plus therapy is amazing. Therapy alone can be amazing as well. Some people need the added medication. Medication itself, if you know people that say, I'm depressed and I'm on medication and that's not working and they're not doing anything else but medication, that could be part of the problem. So you might encourage them to say, well, maybe it's time to talk to someone. Maybe it's time to think a little bit differently about things. And as we talk about this, go ahead, next thing, quit doing that. Don't self-diagnose, okay? It's so easy now, right? You go into Google and type in what is depression, and they'll have a list right there of all 9 of the criteria. And you start looking and say, I've got that, I've got that, I've got that, I've got that, I've got that. And then you think you have that. Psychological diagnosis it's scientific to a certain extent, but it's also a bit of an art as well. So you need a professional to diagnose you. And I recommend, if you're going to get diagnosed with a mental health condition, get diagnosed by a credentialed mental health professional. Not a primary care physician, not a chiropractor, anything like that. These people mean very, very well, but that is not what they do. That's not their forte. Just like you wouldn't come to me for a broken arm, don't go to your PCP for depression. Come see me and say, Dr. Morgan, here are my symptoms. Do I meet the criteria? What should I do? And then we can help you figure out treatment as well from that. Okay, a few tips to avoid burnout. Number 1, set and enforce work-life boundaries. This can be a little tricky, especially for those who work remotely. I work from home now, and so my office is like 10 steps from my bedroom. And so sometimes I'll be like, okay, well, I didn't get everything I needed to get done between 8 and 5 and at 7:30 p.m., and so I want to go in and do some more. I can do that if I want to, but I don't have to do that, right? And if you find, and I'm not burned out on my work, so I don't have that issue, but for people who are, you have to establish that boundary. You have to say, this is when I work, and this is when I'm not working, and stick to that. You're the only one that can enforce that. Take time for yourself. Whatever that is, hobbies, breaks, exercise, sufficient sleep, whatever that is, you have to take care of yourself first. Even just little things. You don't have to worry about, again, 2 weeks in Maui. That sounds fantastic, right? But maybe just 5 minutes every day for yourself and something that you prefer to do. Reading your favorite book or meditating or doing a little exercise or something. Even just taking that little bit of time for yourself can make a difference. And then developing greater mindfulness. Mindfulness is an amazing strategy. If you want to know how to do it, just Google. You can Google that. Don't Google your symptoms, but you can Google mindfulness. And there's a ton of different resources there on how to learn how to become more mindful. And what happens is as you become more mindful, as your thoughts come to your mind, you recognize them more. You perceive them as such. And then you can start to get a little bit ahead of the game. When you start feeling a little off or something, you say, oh, okay, well, what's that about? And then maybe you can you can do something before you hit the burnout stage or before you hit the depression stage as well. Okay, at Silicon Slopes, we recognize the value of talking about mental health. So we have these monthly town halls. We have a Mental Health Momentum podcast. And then if you have any questions, you can email mentalhealth@siliconslopes.com. That goes directly to me. I'm happy to answer that. With that, I'll turn it back to Brandy, or are we going to our, oh, that's right, Brandy's next. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Dr. Morgan, and thank you guys for being here. There's some new faces. I am Brandy Vega. I'm the founder of Promise to Live. We've been doing these monthly mental health town halls since December, actually. And because of burnout, I used to always wonder what my breaking point was. I tried it in the military. I tried it in TV. I've worked 3 jobs. I've gone to school full-time, worked full-time. I never hit it until 3 years ago. I found my breaking point. I was like, oh, I found the limit. I can't do any more. I am at my breakout point. So I discovered, I think, a little bit where my line in the sand was and where burnout affects me. And I've been experiencing it the last few months, and I know that. And it's been hard. That's part of the reason we're having this, is because I know I need it. But because of burnout, I'm going to recycle a talk I gave last week at the Utah Valley Chamber of Commerce Annual Summit. And I just found this a little bit profound as I'm trying to process what I'm going through and what I'm dealing with. And so I wanted to share this. Go ahead. And I didn't stop to get my clicker. So this is my clicker, Adam, my husband. He's amazing. Thank you. I want to share the parable of the Chinese farmer. One day, the farmer's horse ran away. And the townspeople all came and said, oh, man, what bad luck. This is horrible. You poor sucker. And he's like, yeah, maybe, maybe not. We'll see. A few days later, the horse returns. Well, the horse comes back and it brings extra horses. And everybody's like, yay, this is great. He says, maybe, maybe not. We'll see. So later, the farmer's son, they ran a farm. Their horse was integral in the work that they did. Well, the farmer's son was like, I'm going to try to break this horse. We've got these extra horses. This is great. And so he gets out there to break the horse, but instead the horse broke him, and he broke his leg. And so then again, everybody always rallies around. Oh, what bad luck. This stinks. That's horrible. The wise farmer says, maybe, maybe not. We'll see. Shortly after, the army came to the village to draft all the able-bodied young men for war, and his son was skipped because he had a broken leg. And everyone gathered and said, oh, man, what a blessing. You're so lucky. This is amazing. And the wise farmer said, maybe, maybe not. We'll see. This is my family, and I think a lot of us have had a lot of good, bad, blessed, not blessed, cursed, whatever you want to call it. We look at things in life, and when we're talking about burnout, it's easy to let these things build up and say, man, I've had a slew of bad luck. I've had all of this horrible things happening to me. And I think part of what we can do is, one, take some of the tips that Dr. Morgan mentioned. But the other thing is to look at it and say, maybe, maybe not. We'll see. I can tell you some of my most dark moments landed me here today, sharing some of the light and some of the hope that we go through. I don't usually share pictures of my family, but this is my why. This is what gets me through. My husband, my daughter Adia, she's 22. Kaya's 18 now. And many of you know her story. And it's been a struggle. And my little boy, that's Blaze, he's 7, born addicted to meth. I adopted him through foster care. My 18-year-old, she just turned 18 like a week or 2 ago. She just finished building the Dallas Mavericks mascot. She's building pro mascots, right? For incredible teams. She works for John Absey, the former Jazz Bear. She did Bumble, Cosmo, and just a few days ago, she finished up the Dallas Mavericks mascot. And they loved her work so much that they have ordered her to build another one. So I'm really exceptionally proud of her. She graduated a full year in advance, and she's on her way to college. But if we hadn't been through the maybe, maybe nots of life, getting knocked down, getting beat up, almost losing somebody to suicide, people that we love, we wouldn't be able to have the opportunities. So I would just challenge you, as we talk this month about burnout and what we're going through, every challenge presents an opportunity. And it's what we choose to do with that opportunity. Just a few things that I want to share. This is the condensed version. I know I've mentioned a few of these for some of you who've been here before, but there's one word that really changes everything. Do you know what that word is? Please, thank you. No, those are great. You're right. That's two. But the word is really. Really, really. So, when we're talking about this, how many of us are feeling burnt out? How many of us are carrying heavy burdens that people don't know about? But if somebody comes up to me and says, "Hey, Tom, how you doing?" What's your typical answer? But the answer is...
I say I'm good. That's my token answer. I'm good.
I'm good, I'm fine. But how does that change when I say, "Hey, Tom, how are you doing?" Really?
I'm tired.
Yeah, then you get the real answer. Can I challenge you guys to add that to your vocabulary? When you want to really get to know people, when you want to really show you care, when you want to really have a conversation, ask someone how they're really doing. Just add really. It's so simple and it's so powerful. Hey, how are you? Really? That gives you the permission to be like, they care. They want to know, and I can open up. And part of what we're going through is we're all going through it, even if you look like you're not going through it. So can you guys do that for me this week? Can you do it? Can you really do it? Okay, incorporate that in and let me know how it goes. Have in your conversations. Just add really. The next thing I wanted to share is this part. Give a piece of your heart. Instead of giving a piece of your mind, try to give a piece of your heart. I'm going to briefly share this story again. I was working with this guy. He came in. He was very ornery. He was very rude. I was a senior. I was not the boss, but I was more senior than him. I had been there for many years. This is his first or second time on the job. And he shows up and he's being a jerk, real jerk. And I got very mad. And I decided I was going to march over and ask him, "What is your problem? You come in here, you're rude to people, you're short." And as I'm walking over, I felt spirit, impression, prompting, whatever it is that you want to call it, I felt that I should not do that. And so as I marched over there, maybe stomping, that's been my new thing too. When I don't get my way. It's funny, huh? Oh, yeah, it's funny. It's a joke because we have a 7-year-old. But anyway, I was probably walking over there a little angry. And before I got to him, I was going to say, "What is your problem?" And I felt inspired to say, "Are you okay?" And he started to cry. He got tears in his eyes and he said, "No, actually, I'm not okay. Today is the anniversary of my wife's death. And my kids were really struggling this morning, and it's been a very hard morning." And he tears up and he starts to cry, and I got emotional, and I just gave this guy a big hug. And we just stood there and I just hugged him. And everything changed. That was the biggest wake-up call for me. Because was I justified in being angry with him? Probably. Imagine how differently it would have been if I went over to him and said, what is your problem? When he's already dealing with this. We all experience burnout. We all experience pain and hardships and difficult times, and sometimes we make it look easy. What I do is hard, you guys. It's hard, but I show up here and I'm happy. But that doesn't mean I go home and I'm not struggling. We're all going through things. And some days are good and some days are hard. And some days are maybe and some days are maybe nots. And for me that day, I was so thankful that I was given the opportunity to choose kindness, give grace, and lead with love. And this is kind of my motto for me every day, in every way. When I'm driving, choose kindness, give grace, lead with love. You're never going to regret that decision, but you will regret the opposite. So since we started with the parable of the farmer, I kind of want to end with another one. Plus, we live out on a small ranch with dogs and chickens and all kinds of stuff, so I'm practically a farmer now. So we're going to just share this last one. It's a parable of the donkey. And this old donkey, reminds me of me sometimes, fell into a deep well. And the donkey was just in there crying and screaming and begging, and the farmer's like hears him, and he comes to help. And he gets there, and he tries, and it's so deep, and he can't get there, and the donkey's just wailing, like, "Please save me, save me, save me," if he talked. It's not Shrek, but if it did. And so he's in there, and finally the farmer tries, and he's like, I can't save him. He's an old donkey. He's had a good life. You know what? Let's just bury him. Let's just close this up so we don't have any more problems. And so he starts to do it. And then, of course, nosy neighbors, the townspeople show up, and they're like, hey, will you help me just bury this donkey? So everybody gets a scoop of dirt, and they start scooping it in the hole. And at first, the donkey's just screaming still and crying, like, save me. And then, what are you doing? All of us are getting dirt thrown in our face in one way or another every day. At work, at home, whatever it is that we're going through. But we, like the donkey, have the opportunity to sit down and cry, to lay down and die, or to shake it off. And so after a minute, the donkey stopped crying. And the farmer's like, well, is he dead? And he's looking down there, and he saw what was happening, and the donkey was shaking it. People are slinging dirt. They're slinging mud. And he thought, no, not today. And he took it, and he shook it, and then he stood on it, and he stomped on it. And he used it to build a platform to raise him up out of that hole, one step at a time, through resilience. Every single one of us have felt like the donkey at the bottom of the well. We know what it's like to feel burnout, and the burnout can feel like the dirt that's being slung on you. But you each have an opportunity every single day to choose. Are you going to shake it off? Are you going to let it go? And then use it to build your foundation and to see your way out. And sometimes it might take a long time, and other times it might be quick. But you have the power to do that. And I think as we talk about resilience and burnout, shake it off. You got this, one step at a time. Whatever it is you're going through, you can get through. As always, I want you guys to make the promise to live. We have the coins. Some of you guys got the coins. We'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. I want you all to have my information too before I toss it over to our next speakers who've prepared incredible things. If you have not gotten a hold of me, if you want to get a hold of me, if you want to partner with me, if you want to get involved in any of the work, please do. I can tell you this much. When you're experiencing burnout, one of the best ways to put out some of that pain and fire is to serve others. It's to find purpose. It's to know that what you're doing matters, that who you are and what you're building contributes to something that's meaningful. And if you're looking for an opportunity for that, we always welcome you. This is my sign. Is it good? For next slide. Thank you. So our next town hall, just mark it on your calendars, is November 21st. It's on forgiveness with Chris Williams, who lost his family to a drunk driver. There's been movies and books. It's going to be really great. And December 5th is on gratitude, and we've got Joel Zuckerman, who's written over 10 books, to come and speak on that. So please mark those on your calendar and be here. And then with that, I just appreciate you guys all being here. We're going to turn over to our speakers. There's notes in the back. If you guys have questions at the end, write them down. We'll do a little Q&A, and then we'll move forward. So our first speaker is going to be Lance King. He's a physical fitness and nutritionist. He's an amazing human being and a good friend of ours. He's going to share how burnout can contribute to burnout in your body and how we can navigate these things together. And then we have the one and only incredible Tony Childs, who is elevated. Yeah, I'm going to let him tell you this, but he's going to teach you guys some tools and takeaways that are so critical. So we hope you stick around. And for those of you that are leaving right now and breaking my heart, if you're walking out on me right now and I'm so devastated, I'm just going to shake that dirt off that you're piling on me. You can watch the live stream later, and you can catch this on Silicon Slope's YouTube page. They do post all these videos, so please take it and share it. Lance, to you.
Thank you. Many years ago, when I bought my first car, I was just so pumped to drive. I think a lot of us can relate with that first car experience. Well, for me, while I was so excited about driving this first car, I began to forget some of the really important details that go into maintaining a car. And unfortunately, as I was driving this first car, going down the highway, I had this vehicle completely shut off on me. I had no idea that what had actually happened was my engine seized. I had run out of oil. This is a cautionary tale, but very instructive. I've looked back on that experience throughout my life, looked back at some of the non-negotiables that unfortunately come up in story form as things to do and things not to do. What I'd like to do is share some health care tips that we can apply much like we would have or should have applied in that car situation that can help impact from the moment you wake up until the moment that you go to sleep. So, just like a car, at the very beginning of the day, if we aren't putting in the right type of fuel in that vehicle, as much hope as we have to get to various destinations, we may not get there if we don't put the right type of fuel in our bodies. And so from the very beginning, it is absolutely critical in the morning to start with something that's actually going to be substantial and provide the type of energy that you need to perform at certain levels. And so quick fix solutions, like maybe just getting coffee or just living on Monster energy drink in the morning, probably not a solution that is going to carry you to peak performance throughout the day. So the next would be getting in the car. So after you've had a balanced meal with proteins, healthy fats, and complex carbohydrates, we all have vehicles. In some cases, when you work at home, your vehicle is your desk. But at any way, we want to, like a vehicle, look at the dashboard and kind of get a quick checkup from the neck up to determine how we are going to move forward. And certainly we want to move forward day in and day out with intention. But it can be really difficult if some of the things from the day before are still weighing on your mind. So let me submit that one of the most powerful ways to clear your mind and to set the right intentions is to first focus on good breath, good posture, but then to do a brain dump and to journal. Most of your phones have a journal app or a notes app. These can be some of the greatest resources of all time for you, because sometimes before we can move forward, we really do have to work through things that have happened the day before. And perhaps that exercise may lead to things that have happened decades before. Sometimes that will be part of your experience. But this brain dump experience will help you to check in, again, just like you would looking at the gauges on a vehicle. So then moving into a day, I encourage you to stay hydrated. Most of you have water here that's sitting right in front of you. That is such a healthy practice. We want to make sure that burnout at the end of the day is being mitigated by the things we're doing in the front end of the day. And so after you've set your intentions for the day and you begin to move into the day, I strongly encourage you to keep, and I would keep about 40 ounces, and I do. If you saw this desk over here, I have a 40-ounce thing of water, so that when my water is completely gone, I know to fill it up again. And what that does is that in the midday before lunch, it gets us up and moving. As exciting as it is to get into a flow state, we need pattern interrupts that can help our physiology to move a little bit of a different direction so that we can come back to our work and perform at that peak performance. And so, again, filling your water back up is a very fantastic practice. one of the things that I often do is I will schedule calls very intentionally at about 10 o'clock in the day. 10 or 10:30, I often have calls scheduled so that there's movement midday, so that I can come back again to whatever the project is and have a little bit more presence. Isn't it amazing that when we take care of ourselves, the more we invest into ourselves, the more we actually have to invest in other people? I think that is such a fascinating topic. And yet sometimes we are just so focused on these tasks that we lose ourselves. And so then comes lunch. Well, if you have a little bit of movement midday, that is going to literally help you metabolically to prepare for lunch. One of the things that many of us can agree on is that a lot of lunches put us into kind of a crash. And in fact, a lot of executives that I work with say that they plan most of their days from as early as they can wake up until about lunch, anticipating that they're going to have that lunch crash. Isn't that amazing? They anticipate that. But again, the active motion in a midpoint of the day can help you metabolically prepare for that lunch time. As well, maybe some of you have heard of meal sequencing. So let me share a tip for you to write down. This crash that happens after lunch, one of the biggest reasons for this crash is this response that our body has to release insulin or to balance blood sugar. The things that we eat cause a huge spike in insulin because our body needs to move things around. Well, to reduce that spike of insulin, when you eat, you can use this tool of GPS to navigate any of your lunch meals, whether that's at a networking event, whether that's at home, at any place. If you eat greens first, followed by protein second, and then move into the things that break down into sugar, that's the S at the end, complex carbohydrates and simple sugars is that S. This order will help your body so it doesn't have to release as much insulin. And it will help your blood sugar to be more balanced after lunch, thus preventing that crash, thus enabling you to continue to perform at your highest potential. So then midday moves forward. You're now at, say, 3 o'clock in the day. This is, for many people, a time where we hit this proverbial wall. And I love the story about the man that wants to try, wants to see what it's like to be in a race car. And this is a personal dream for me as well. This man gets in a race car with an instructor, and in this course to learn how to race this race car, there's a part of the track where they've intentionally put water and oil. And as soon as the driver gets into this space, it's intentionally designed to cause a tailspin. Well, the story ensues that this man does go into this tailspin, and he is literally thinking about only one thing, and that's hitting this wall. Well, your thoughts may first have gone to, well, he's got this instructor, so this instructor's going to grab the wheel. Well, that's not what he did. In fact, what he did was, rather than take control of the vehicle, all he did was turn this man's attention back to the track. And I think that's instructive, because when we are in those moments of nearly hitting these proverbial walls, there are so many things that we can do to continue to move forward. Oftentimes, again, it's some of the things that you're doing midday. It's getting extra water, staying hydrated. It's not always getting a snack, by the way. We want to make sure in between our meals that there's nothing that is having to be digested. And that's going to be a critical part of wellness later in the day. So doing something with breath work or movement, maybe light exercise at 3 o'clock. A lot of times people will do 15 minutes of something active, and that then moves us into a dinner meal. So it's been said that when we eat, we want to eat like a king for breakfast, we want to eat like a queen for lunch, and we want to eat like a pauper for dinner. Effectively, this is saying that that evening meal, we're not going to have as much activity in the evening. It's more of a preparatory state to get into recovery from the day. And so a lighter meal, still focused on high fiber greens, protein second, and then complex carbohydrates is recommended. But then a couple of things that I'd encourage you to think about as you're moving into the next day. Remember that everything that you're doing today is going to impact your next day. There literally is a compound effect that happens with our choices, made or not made. And so being very cognizant of what your activities are in the evening, making time for rest, but even pulling away from some of the activities that are more frequented. If you're somebody that's on a screen all day long, conscientiously focusing on not being on a screen and maybe turning to relationships and perhaps even having a conversation to emotionally and psychologically connect with a human being that is not business related or otherwise is such a critical component. For those of you that have relationships with a significant other and you want to keep them, I've learned, and in some cases by sad experience, that if you are not emotionally connecting, making deposits emotionally with the people that you care about, there is no question that, like that car that I had when I was 16 years old, that is the oil to true fulfillment, is the relationships that we have in our lives. And so making that time is absolutely critical. Now, lastly, as exciting as it is to be involved in a project, create boundaries. Just like you'd create boundaries with a balanced meal, maybe you even have a specific time every single day. This is when I eat. It's so important that you have consistent rhythms at night. Getting adequate rest, saying at this time of day, I'm going to drop everything, and now I'm in a preparatory state for the next day for rest. Being intentional about this is so critical. If you are feeling, even right now, the effects of lack of sleep from last night, or the effects of nutrition from the day before, these rhythms, when we're awake and when we're asleep, they ultimately create feeling and emotion. But wherever you're at, just know that the next phase of the day, wherever you're at this particular point, that is the next step. There's always a next best step. I like to say as a fitness coach that your fitness is never owned. It's rented, and the rent is due every day. Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm excited to be here today. Thank you for allowing me to be here, Brandy. So I was in a workshop about 10 years ago when I was in the banking world. I was a banking executive, and the instructor said, if you change the way you see things, then the things you see will change. It was based on a book out of Harvard called The Happiness Advantage, and so I nudged my boss. I said, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Can I leave? She said, if you want to be fired. So I said, I'll stay. And I stayed like this, stayed begrudgingly. This is stupid. I can't believe I'm here. And within a few minutes, I was leaning in, and within a few hours, it was hook, line, and sinker for me. I was learning about the power of the mind, the power that the mind plays on our lives, on our bodies. And from that moment forward, I changed everything. I changed my degrees in college. I was two semesters away from a finance degree, changed to a speech communications degree with an emphasis in psychology. I just wanted to learn as much about the mind and about the brain and as I could. And over this last decade, I've had the privilege of working with some pretty amazing people. And I now coach professional athletes. That's what I do. So when NFL athletes or Olympians are done with their playing careers, I'm the one that kind of takes them in and says, hey, let's get you going into the next phase of life. Guess how they show up to me? Burnt out. That's how they show up. And so over these next few minutes, I want to share with you the models that I share with them of helping them transition to the next area of life, understanding like what's going on inside of themselves so that we can help them transition over. It was about a year and a half ago that the number one offensive lineman in the NFL retired. And over the ensuing months after he retired, he got addicted to drugs. He was on the verge of divorce. And his best friend, who I was coaching at the time, called me and said, hey, can you help my friend? I said, of course I can. Bring him on in. Let's chat with him. This guy was the number one NFL lineman and was crashing because of burnout, because of what was happening. So the burnout, here's what I know, it's not just something that is happening in the moment. Burnout can happen and cascade in your life, and it can continue to cascade as people are trying to figure out how do I get out of this cyclone of burnout. So we took him in, and I shared with him a model. So for the next few minutes, I just want to share with you this model that hopefully might be helpful for you if you're experiencing any sort of burnout. By the way, I appreciate Dr. Morgan and his comments about depression. That is a diagnosis, and I would recommend that if you're feeling anything that resembles depression, please go see a psychologist, a clinical mental health psychologist that can be able to help you. So thank you, Dr. Morgan, for sharing that. So I am going to share this model here for my speakers up here. If you want, you can stay up here, or if you want to see, you can come down here, whatever you'd like. All right. So on a piece of paper, here's what I'd like you to draw. If you got a piece of paper with you, we're going to draw a cloud. Underneath that cloud, we're going to draw a heart. And underneath that heart, we're going to draw a box. This is Psychology 101, okay? This is you. This is the best demonstration I can give of you. And so what do you think the cloud represents? This is very interactive, by the way. What do you think the cloud represents? Okay, what I think. What do you think the heart represents? How I feel. And the box represents the energy with which you act. Now, some people get spooked by the word energy, so another word that I would give that is attitude. The attitude with which you act. Okay? So, on top of our little cloud here, we're going to put 5 antennae. Those 5 antennae represent your 5 senses. What you see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. You are a physical being living in a physical world, and therefore your eyes and your ears and what you touch with your hands, it's going to have an impact on what you think. Now, above these antennae, write the word uncertainty. What are some of the uncertainties that people are dealing with in the world today? What are some uncertainties? Politics. Are there political uncertainties happening in the world today? Oh, you betcha. We got an election with tons of uncertainty happening, right? What other uncertainties are happening? The stock market. Are there economic uncertainties happening with people's 401ks and their mortgages and what's going to go on with their jobs? Yes. What other uncertainties are people dealing with? Health. Are there health uncertainties? Am I going to be alive tomorrow? Am I going to be able to walk again? Am I going to be able to see again? You mentioned one right here. Relationship. Are there relationship uncertainties in marriages and with kids? Are there uncertainties, yes or no? Yes. Can you escape them? No. You can't escape them. They're everywhere and they will always be there. So that first thing that psychologist shared from that stage is if you change the way you see things, the things you see will change. And I laughed out loud. In essence, is the basis of everything that I love and I teach now, is how you see things is way more important than what you see. The great Albert Einstein once shared a comment that completely changed me. He said, the greatest decision you'll ever make in your lifetime is whether you believe you live in a hostile, there's a negative right there, or a friendly universe. The greatest decision you'll ever make in your lifetime is whether you believe you live in a hostile or a friendly universe. If I wake up every day and I believe I live in a hostile universe, what thought pattern will I create when I look at uncertainties in my life? Okay, they're going to be hostile. And what it is it's going to be doubt. You will doubt. And what you'll doubt first is yourself. You'll say, can I really do this? Can I really overcome this? Am I really equipped to be able to have this and be this? And then you'll doubt everything else. You'll doubt the economy. You'll doubt the politics. You'll doubt your job. You'll doubt your boss. You'll doubt your everything. It's self-inward, and then it's outward. Okay, so we doubt, and then what we do is we have this beautiful gift called our imagination, and we start to imagine WCS. Worst case scenarios. So I'm looking at this uncertainty. I believe I live in a hostile universe, and now my imaging system starts to imagine all the worst possible things that can happen. Has anybody felt this before? And you start to go down this realm and you can't get out of it. Worst possible things. What feeling does that create? Okay? Worry and fear. Worry and fear. We call these people worry warts. Have you ever heard of them? Okay, they believe they live in this hostile universe. They start to imagine all the worst possible things that can happen. Now they're feeling all this worry and fear inside of their body. What energy does that create in the body? Worry and fear. It creates anxiety. Now, do people go around expressing or suppressing their anxiety? What do they do with it? They suppress it. Most, some will express it. Most suppress their anxiety. And the suppression of anxiety eventually can turn into depression, disease, and decay. Life slows down. The body's not at ease. It's diseased. And then everything starts falling apart. Marriage starts falling apart. Kids start falling apart. Homes start falling apart. What percentage of the population, now I've done a lot of corollary studies with Gallup and employee engagement. What percentage of employees and people wake up on this side every day, worldwide? 85%. 85% of the public is waking up thinking and believing that they are living in a hostile universe, that the world is out to get them, of everything wrong that is with their life and everything around them. 85%. And is that number going up or down? It's going up. Hence why I'm on this stage. We need this number to go down. We need this number to go down. So, if I believe I live in a friendly universe, what thought pattern will create in my head when I see those same uncertainties? If I believe I live in a friendly universe, that this is not happening to me, this is happening for me, what thought pattern will that create? It creates confidence. And confidence is first inward and then outward. I got this. I can do this. I can make this happen. Yeah, all of this uncertainty about, but I'm equipped. I've done this before. I can do this again. Then, what we do is we will start to look at life with this imaging system through BCS, best case scenario. You have to train your brain to do this. It is not designed to look at best case scenario. It is designed to protect you. It is designed to go out there and look at dangers and what is dangerous in my life. You have to train it to say, that's the worst thing that can happen. What's the best thing that can happen? I want you to think about the next time you're imagining the worst possible things that can happen. Do you ever go to the other side and say, okay, wait, stop, time out. What's the best thing that can happen with what's going on right now? Now, if I have this confidence, what is the feeling that washes out fear and worry? Love. This is taught in the good book. The perfect love casteth out what? All fear. Now, how many of you have been in love before? Raise your hand if you've been in love. If you're here with a spouse, I'd recommend you raise your hand. Okay? What are the feelings that get created, or what's the energy that gets created in the body when you are in love? The energy turns to one of excitement. Excitement. Now, do people go around suppressing or expressing their excitement? What do they do with it? It's the expression of excitement. The expression of excitement turns into momentum, wellness, and growth. The three most important words to any entrepreneur, any business owner, any athlete: am I catching the wave of momentum? Are we well and whole? And are we growing? But if you're on the left side, are you catching the wave of momentum? Are you well and whole? And are you growing? Yes or no? No. I saw one of the best demonstrations of momentum I have ever seen in my life. I am not a fan of the team down south. I'm just going to let y'all know that. Hopefully you don't throw stuff at me. I'm a fan of the team up north, meaning Utah. And it was a couple of weeks ago. Thank you. It was a couple of weeks ago. I got this feeling as I was driving home from we were at dinner with my family, and we were driving home. It was 7 o'clock at night, and I got this feeling. He says, you need to go to the game. Well, the Utah-Oklahoma State game had already been played. I'm like, what game? And I got the thought, like, you need to go to the BYU game. And I went in my head, no, I'm not going to the BYU game. And it came back, you need to go to the BYU game. So I said, okay, I'm going to go to the BYU game. And I went to my son, and I was hoping that my son would, like, let me off the hook. And so I said, Jack, do you want to go to the game? And he said, yeah, that'd be fun. He's a bigger Utah fan than I am. I was hoping he'd be like, no, and then I'd be like, okay. So we go to the BYU game, and we're sitting there, and they're playing Kansas State. Did anybody watch this game? Okay, it was 6-0. They were going into halftime. There was 2 minutes left. There was 2 minutes left, and Kansas State was walking up and down the field on BYU. BYU could not stop them until they got to the end zone, and then they would stop them, and they'd kick field goals. But other than that, BYU couldn't do anything, and Kansas State was doing everything. And then something changed. They kicked a field goal. It was 6-3. They get the ball back, Kansas State does, and they fumble it, and BYU picks it up and runs it into the end zone. What happened to the energy of that athlete, that team, and that stadium? Did it go left or right? It went way right. So they come back out on the field. The quarterback throws an interception, and they score again. It is 17-6 in a matter of 2 minutes. They go into halftime. They come out of halftime. They throw in, BYU comes all the way down the field, throws another touchdown. It is now 24-6. The next possession, Kansas State's 3 and out. They punt it. Punt returner, seriously, I think he ran 150 yards, and he scored a touchdown. Here's what I saw, and I had to see it. Because if I was on TV, I wouldn't have been able to see it, but I saw momentum. I saw it. I saw offensive linemen, as they were coming on for the extra point, running onto the field doing this. What was happening? Fun, wellness, momentum. It was one of the greatest demonstrations of momentum I ever saw, of how momentum can shift and change. But when we're over here, everything slows down. Everything starts falling apart. So, in closing, my last couple of minutes, I want to share with you a couple of signs. What are a couple of signs that you're on the left side or you're on the right side? Number one sign you are on the left side is comparison. If you are comparing anything in life, you are on the left side. Because here's the thing you have to know. If you're better than someone, then by default you are less than someone. If you are less than someone, then by default you are better than someone. And when we are in comparison, it will always lead to number 2. And number 2 is a belief and a pattern that there's not enough. That there's not enough. There's not enough time. There's not enough money. There's not enough love. There's not enough kindness. I don't have enough resources. And what it stems from is it stems from looking in the mirror and seeing someone who is not enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not courageous enough. I'm not persistent enough. I'm not enough. Do you want to know what the number one cause to depression is in the United States of America today? And Dr. Morgan probably vouched for me on this one. Number one cause to depression today. Number one cause. Do you want to know what it is? Social media. Amen. Why? Because it's all comparison. And it drives people into a thought pattern of doubt, worrying if they measure up, anxious. Now, how do I know when I'm on the right side? Number one, I know who I am. I don't need to compare. I know who I am. The day my life changed is the day I stopped trying to be someone else on these stages and just started being Tony Child. And the day you start just trying to be you and stop trying to be someone else, you will notice your burnout will decrease. I believe one of the leading causes of burnout is the constant rat race of trying to be someone else. Trying to measure up, trying to make sure that your investors know that you're good enough, trying to make sure that your employee knows that you're good enough so you don't get fired. It's this constant, I'm not enough, so I've got to prove it, and therefore the burnout begins. How do I know when I'm on this left side or the right side? When you can look in the mirror and know that you're always enough. And if there's any message I can leave with you today, it's that you are always enough. Yes, can you get better? Of course you can. Can I get better? Of course I can. But when I believe that I'm not enough, it will drive me into this incessant burnout of I've got to get better and I've got to do more and I've got to have more. But when you can just see that there's always enough and you're always enough, you'll notice peace and calmness in your life, even amidst all the uncertainty and all the chaos. So in my last minute, let me give you two things that you can do to move from the left to the right. Number one, if you're an employer or a leader, tell people what you see in them. Don't think it. Tell them. If you see someone do a good job, tell them they did a good job because it will reinforce that they are enough. If you don't tell them, they have to guess. And if they have to guess, what percentage of them are guessing that they're not enough? 85% of them. So tell people what you see in them so that they can affirm, okay, I'm enough. Number two, Dr. Benjamin Hardy, one of my dear friends, he and I have worked together on many projects. He wrote the book 10X is Easier Than 2X, and he wrote the book Gap versus the Gain. Has anybody read the book Gap versus the Gain? Gap thinking versus gain thinking. Here's another little tidbit for you. Gap thinking is when I look at my results in comparison where I think I should be. And how big is that gap? Massive. And it will always lead to, you're not enough. Look at where you should be. Gain thinking is, look at how far I've come in relation to where I was to where I am. And if you can just look at life through that, you will notice your burnout decrease. Look at life through a lens of how far you've come and just know you are always enough. Thank you.
Amazing. That was fantastic. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Lance. Thank you, Tom. Everyone who's participated today. Did you guys get some good nuggets? Yes. And some good pizza? Yes. We have a few minutes if you've got questions that you would like to ask our panel. We have little notes that you can pass around, something like that. What's that? Yeah, come on back up. Stick on up. Does anyone have any questions that they want to ask about any of the things that you've learned? Yeah.
I want to know
And you can also, if you have additional questions, write them down. We'll take it. Thanks.
How do you improve your sense of knowing that you are enough if there's no one else to do it for you?
How do you improve your sense that you're always enough? Yes. The first thing is to start to train your brain that there is enough. So our brain wants to look at life through a lens of what's there to hurt me, and eventually it will look at what's missing and what's wrong. So the first step isn't to choose to what's right with me, it's what's right with my world. And so the best practice you can get into is a practice of gratitude. It's the best practice to get into to start the process of getting this semblance of I am enough. You probably won't get there right up front, but just looking at, okay, what's right with my world, what is in my world versus what's wrong and what's missing with my world.
Yeah.
Can I piggyback on that as well? Sorry. I want
Come
to
up
turn
to
your
the stage.
I want to turn your question on its head. You said, how can you feel say your question again, just for me?
How can you get a sense of you are enough?
And without others helping you do that, right? And can I suggest that that process doesn't start with others? You need to put others out of it entirely. I mean, if you're saying, I need to wait for other people to do something for me, you're stuck the rest of your life. So the sooner you start thinking about this and saying, this is my issue, this is my problem, what can I do, what's within my control, and just leave others out of it, I think that's going to make a huge difference as well. Because then you're not saying, when I don't get it from others, then what can I do to make up the difference? You're saying, I'm going to do everything I can. If someone brings something to the table for me later, that's just bonus, right? Because I've already accomplished that for myself.
One thing I would advise too is I talked about setting your intentions for the day. And for me, I've journaled for over a decade. I've nearly done it every single day for over a decade. And my mental health increases every day in every way when I make that time. It can take 5 minutes if you're just voice texting about your day before. And my experience has been that is when I am expressing gratitude for that day before, where I'm looking back on what has been accomplished relationship-wise, business-wise, fitness-wise. I have many areas that I like to write about now, but making that 5 to 10 minutes, what a remarkable springboard that can be for you.
Did you have a thought, Tom?
I just was going to say, what
Bless
Tony described as his second point, I think, is monumental for most people, and that is stop comparing outside, look inside, how far you've become or how far you've come. You know, I journal too. I mean, this is what I do daily, and it's partially to measure those things of where was I and where am I now? And it's not easy to do, especially when you're at a low point. I wish teens would figure this out. I wish parents would teach kids those last two things that Tony just went through, because that is the problem with teens today. That's why social media is such a cancer, is because it's a constant comparison. You know, if you're 18 years old and you don't have a Lambo yet, like, your life's over, right? They're comparing to these outside incredibly successful people and benchmarking, I'll never get there, versus where am I now in relation to me and my own progression. So yeah, those last two things are brilliant, you know, that Tony shared. And journaling, I do it. I mean, and that the process is just that, even at the end of the day. What went well today, right? Pushing myself intentionally from the left to the right. You know, that visual on that board over there is really good. Just to visually see, where am I landing, left or right.
I've learned so much over the last year of doing these, and one of the things that really I'm thinking of as you ask that question that's helped me a lot is, you know, when you're 5, 6 years old, 7 years old, you ask a kid, they think they're amazing. They think they're the cutest thing. They think they're the smartest thing. They think they're the fastest. When do we stop that? We stop that when we let these doubts creep in. And even I shared before, you know, it's hard. Comparison is hard. We have to literally catch ourselves and say, don't do that. Look at where you've come. But I thought somebody didn't like me. I thought I didn't measure up. I had all these feelings and just judged that, the way somebody looked at me or didn't respond quick enough. And I thought, this person doesn't like me. And then it was literally a few weeks later, they put this nice LinkedIn post about me. Oh my gosh, I admire Brandy. And I was like, I thought she didn't even like me. And it made me sit back and go, why have I been telling myself these lies? And so I've been trying to shift my brain to say, assume everyone loves you. Why wouldn't they love you? Assume everybody likes you. Assume you're amazing, and just keep telling yourself. He laughed at me the other day because I was getting ready, and what did I say? No, I said, I'm awesome. I was getting ready, and I was just like, I'm awesome. And he started laughing at me. He goes, yes. I was like, well, why not? I mean, I'm going to say this. Like, we have affirmations and we have things. Sometimes we have to say that. And I'm like, I'm doing hard things. I'm getting up. I'm showing up. I'm awesome. And you're awesome. And you're amazing. And you guys are here and you're putting in the work. Like, tell yourselves that. Why did we lose that confidence as we got older? Because somebody might have said something who was probably jealous and comparing. Right? So assume the best. Assume everybody loves you, and you're amazing, and you're awesome, and you're beautiful, and you're fantastic. Because that's what I do every day. And then I just, tell myself that, whether or not it's true. As long as I think it, my perception's my reality. So who cares? Question? Yeah.
I have a question. Oh, go ahead.
Do you have the mic?
We have a mic right here.
Okay.
Oh, thanks, Lorraine. Is that working?
Yep.
Should I use my sergeant voice? Team, you were unreal. Thank you, everyone, for today. And Brandy, I'm going to be a regular, so thank you. Lance, I'm curious. You journal the next morning. And I know friends that journal and they believe in it. I think I'm going to probably start doing it. Why do you journal in the morning to reflect on yesterday instead of today to reflect, or tonight to reflect on today? I wouldn't be able to remember yesterday in the morning.
Yeah. Well, it's a great question, and what I love framing drive time as automobile university. Zig Ziglar used to talk about that, and so for me, it does take a minute to think about what happened the day before, but that's kind of the point. Is I want to live my life in gratitude, and everything I write, I'm also writing with the intent that my children are going to read Dad's life history, and we are a living genealogy. And so in my most challenging times, that is such a teaching moment, I think, for future generations. And so I think it's so important to certainly write about the things that we want to achieve and the successes from the day before, but it is so important to remember that there's always a compound effect happening for future events.
So writing has to be legible?
Well, so one of the reasons I started doing voice texts is because my writing is not legible. I started writing in cursive, and my kids don't know what I've written, so that's a problem. So I eventually got to a point where I thought, I'm going to have this all transcribed. I need to start just voice texting. It's going to take too long. But I do have stacks of journals.
All right.
Just really fast. Thank you, all of you, for all your expertise and willing to show up for us today. A couple of things I feel inspired to say. And the first one is, if you've never done any kind of gratitude, buy a gratitude journal for yourself for the holidays and share 2 or 3 more with friends or family. I have several gratitude journals now, and it's so fun when you have a horrible day to look back at the thank you notes and the thoughts that you wrote that were positive or whatever. And then when things get really bad, if you can just remember, this is what we were taught in Atlanta at the Chick-fil-A innovation, whatever it was that we went to. They said, just say stop, and then say 5 things that you're grateful for, and that will change your brain waves back into the positivity on the right side. The other thing I was going to say is Dr. Benjamin Hardy had a profound influence on our life. My second daughter spent a lot of time with him when he was doing his PhD in South Carolina. And he changed her life. And she's a very, very positive person, but she's even more positive now. So if you've never read anything that Ben Hardy's done, you ought to look him up. And what gratitude I have in my heart today that all of us showed up so that we can now figure out how we're going to be able to move forward and make a difference for somebody else. Because that's really, at the end of the day, it's about our impact. And all of you that are here are impactful people. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, Curtis.
Thanks, everybody. That was fantastic. Absolutely. Tony, could you say that quote again by Einstein? Wait, let me type. Here we go.
The greatest decision you'll ever make in your lifetime is whether you believe you live in a hostile or a friendly universe. I changed that to a man of faith that I am. The greatest decision I'll ever make in my lifetime is whether I worship a hostile or a friendly God.
It's powerful, right? Very powerful. Any final questions before we wrap up?
Brandy, can I ask one?
Yeah.
And then you can jump back here. But for those of you that work with youth, Brent Despelin is here. I know he works with a lot of youth. There's other mental health professionals in the room today. This topic of comparison is a big one. When I think about the suicide awareness initiative, at the core of it is some key things, right, in terms of youth ending their lives, and comparison is one of them. And we could blame cell phones and mobile phones, a lot of these things we could get into today, but for those of you that work with you, Tony, maybe Brent, to just share some feedback with the group, how do you address comparison with teens without saying no more apps, no more phone, right? The zero tolerance thing is a challenge, for a lot, because we all use them. It's literally our worlds that we live on the phone. So what advice do you give to parents and adults for teaching kids healthy comparison, and does it exist?
I'll chime in real quick, Tom. Sure. I think a lot of it has to do with what Tony taught right here when he says, I know who I am. And I would add, so that's identity, and I would add to that purpose as well. When people understand their identity and their purpose, then they can compare themselves. And it's okay because they know who they are, they know what they're about, and then they can say, well, that guy's doing great too, right? I don't think it's the availability of comparison that is the problem. It's the way that we approach it that's the problem. And I think about like the lockdowns, and you can do that. And it's there about 2 miles from my house is a substance abuse treatment facility, which is wonderful. And you can lock someone up there for 90 days and teach them amazing things for 90 days. And there's no drugs or alcohol available. But if they don't learn how to avoid that once they get out, then they're sunk, right? And so you can't just say, okay, we're going to create a situation where you're never going to compare yourself ever again the rest of your life. You can't do that. You have to teach them some skills so that from inside they can compare themselves, but it doesn't lead to despair. You can compare yourselves, and it can lead to happiness as well. You can say, look how great that person's doing. I'm so excited for that person because I'm happy for myself as well. Brent, did you have thoughts?
So first of all, I think that one of the issues we have is that, and I go for my own family here. I have two boys and a girl. And social media for my boys was not really a big thing, but for my daughter, huge. So there's some gender pieces of this where we have to be really, thoughtful about that, and the fact that girls, generally speaking, struggle way more with the comparison piece and with social media specifically more than boys do. My experience is as we work with kids, and like Tom was saying, I work in a residential treatment program for teenagers, and yeah, they don't have social media while they're with us in the program for, let's say, 60 to 90 days, and yet we know, like Dr. Morgan's saying, they're going to have it when they leave, right? And if we're saying you can't be on social media, and I know people that do that, and I'm not judging them. I'm just saying the reality is that we're all at some point in time going to be on social media. That's just the reality, and so it's about how do we moderate that. And in my experience, when we have families and specifically parents that are having constant communication and open communication with their teenagers and talking about the experiences that they're having and following not only them, but also their friends on social media. So then you have a sense of what's going on with them. That it's about continuous conversations with them. Years ago when social media was very, minuscule, let's say like 15 years ago, as a church leader, I specifically got on social media so I knew what the kids in my neighborhood were involved with, right? And that had to do with like posting about dances, and it gave me opportunities to be able to connect with them on a personal level because I could see what they were doing. So, in my perspective, even though yes, social media, I agree with what certainly what Tony's saying. Like it is really, number one, far and away, causing depression and anxiety for our teens. I believe if we're making sure that we have good, constant, and honest conversations as parents with our kids, then we have the ability to be able to help them navigate through this, because they're going to be adults and they're going to have to figure it out as they get older.
Thank you. One of the things that I'll just add, that is brilliant, and it is like when you look at females versus males, females are a lot more into the comparison. Males, though, here's what I would share when you ask, like, what can we do? Allow failure. In fact, encourage failure. Encourage it, especially with young men, because there is this complex in a young man that says, I cannot fail. I have to be number one. I have to be the best. I have to have the best. And it's this idea, and if I'm not, then I'm the worst. And so it's a drop-off. And so the very thing that I would say is allow and encourage failure. One of my favorite people on the planet is Sarah Blakely. She founded the company Spanx. Anybody heard of that? Probably most of my women have, right? She was in an interview on CNN, and the interviewer asked her, how did you do this? How did you create $1 billion company from nothing? And she thought for a second, and then she said, well, when we were children, my dad would bring us around the dinner table, and we would celebrate every Monday the failure of the week. And we'd have to bring to the dinner table something that we tried that we completely bombed. And then we would celebrate it. We'd give high fives. And then she said this, I didn't realize it at the time, but my dad was reframing my definition of failure from outcome to simply not trying. And so when we can change from outcome to just not trying, like that will shift major things in our youth's head.
I just want to add to this, right? I'm stirring the pot a little bit because I live in this world. I'm married to a therapist. This comparison thing is two-sided, because teens will get on social media and they'll compare themselves. Where are they weak? Where are they not great? But then they go to church and they hear perfection. Who are they comparing to, right? Jesus. I'm a Christian. And so it's very complex in the teen mind what the messages they're hearing. On social media, it's this negative aspect, but in church, it's perfection. And that's a hard standard too, right? So I'm glad you brought that up, Tony. It's very complex in the teen mind. Brent sees this every day, those conflicting messages. So I think that's brilliant. Just open dialogue on both aspects of it. So, comment?
And teenagers are smart too. You can talk to them. You can have complex conversations with them, and they'll understand. You don't have to dumb it down for them. Today's teenagers are brilliant, and you can talk to them about the differences, what it means to be perfect, and all those sorts of things. They can understand that.
Thank you. All right, we have a question for Steve. He's been waiting, so we'll.
There's so many wonderful things that have been brought up. There's so much to learn. I am just so impressed with everyone in the comments and the things taught. Each and every one of us today are going to be going back to our homes. And whether we're parents or grandparents, empty nesters, or whether we have little kids, I love this, that we can decide if we're going to have a hostile or a friendly environment. But we also, as stewards of our own homes and our own families, have the opportunity to create a hostile or friendly environment for our children and our grandchildren and those who look at us. Just in closing here, are there any messages of advice? Again, we could go on for 3 hours on this, but as we go to return back to our homes, as we self-reflect and ask ourselves, what kind of environment are we creating in our own homes? What can we do today to go back and to improve our environments that we create for ourselves and our families?
Tony, you got an answer for that?
Sure, I can start.
I mean, I love that, Steve. I think you're really good at it. I think that the journaling is really good too, and the gratitude. But
yeah, so focus on what's right, like with your kids, with your home. We tend to skew again towards this idea of what's wrong and what's missing instead of what's right and what's present. And so the very first thing to really shift is like, what's right? What did you notice that was right with your kid? What did you notice that was right with your home? What did you notice that was right with your boss? What did you notice that was right? Because we live in a world that is constantly what's wrong. And so be a place, be a sanctuary where you can focus on what is good, what is present in that home versus what's missing and what's wrong.
So from a nutrition side, I shared a framework of GPS, and that can help you navigate your next meal. And I really encourage you to think about how you feel after you have gone through that meal sequence. Now, you don't have to wait till the very end to eat your carbohydrates, but start with high fiber greens, start with a nutritionally dense, a good protein, and then move into your carbohydrates. I think you'll absolutely be amazed if you give that a try. And then lastly, caffeine is a real problem with people wanting to be high performers. We need to make sure we're giving our bodies, if you're gonna have caffeine, do it every 6 hours, or else you're gonna really impact your adrenal glands. And ask me more after this. I'm happy to talk more physiological responses to GPS and to things like caffeine. But our bodies are so acidic. There's so much cortisol being released. And my mission is to help people to become even more balanced as human beings. And I have so much more to give if you'll reach out.
so sleep better, eat better, drink water, find the joy, find the gratitude, find the happiness. Tom, you have any final thoughts on that?
I would just say, in my opinion, from the dialogue that I have daily with mental health professionals, perfectionism is much more of a challenge in the state of Utah than the opposite, right? We think that the next generation is lazy. I don't agree with that, actually. I think that it's different. I think that they don't necessarily know where to present the energy and where to take it, but this idea of taking something home is that for me. Just does perfection have a theme in your home? And if it does, what are you piling on? You know, so I visit with parents often who are in this situation where their child just attempted or they're worried that they will. And it's interesting because when you really think about what's going on, the culture of the home, the vibe of the home, there's a lot of piling on. That's the term that some providers or mental health professionals would say, that parents are piling on. They themselves don't know who they are, Tony's term. And so because the parent doesn't know who they are, they're trying to force some identity on their child. Their problem becomes the child's problem. Mm-hmm. And they're forcing this perfectionistic culture because they don't know who they are, but they really want their kid to know who they are. And drive. They're piling on pressure. So just as a thought, like, what is the vibe and the tone and the theme in the home that is going on there? And what role does the parent play in it? You know? Therapists constantly are getting parents dropping off their child, fix my child in therapy. My wife lives in that world all the time. She's like, come on in, Mom. Have a seat. Come on in, Dad. Let's talk. This is a unit. Child tends to be a byproduct of the unit. So that's my thought. Think about the tone and the theme in the home.
Choose kindness, give grace, lead with love. Choose kindness, give grace, lead with love. You're never going to regret it. Go ahead. Last question.
I actually was responding. It was kind of a comment to the response for the previous, that we're kind of going back to the question about what do we do for our kids in the comparison piece, because I'm actually here for two reasons. I run the Lehigh Cares Coalition, which is a prevention coalition that's specifically a group of leaders here in Lehigh that are working to reduce the number of kids that get involved in things like drug use and suicide and crime and things like that. And the other half of what I do is I'm an executive coach and I specialize in burnout prevention. So I really appreciate everything that you guys have shared today. And I partially just wanted to second already what was said from seeing both sides of this, where that identity piece I really think is central, because what I've seen in my burnout prevention work is that identity is core to a lot of why people burn out, because they have their sense of self is so wrapped up in what they do for work that when things are not going well at work, when they feel like they're drowning, then they feel like they as a person, there's something wrong with them. And that comes from if in childhood we haven't been raised to really know who we are personally in the home, then we outsource our identity to our achievements, to our accomplishments, our outcomes, and that's why a lot of times our career ends up defining us, and our identity is really, really wrapped up in that. And so one of the things that we do at the Lehigh Cares Coalition is that we really promote family attachment. We teach people how to do really how to bond with your children in order to have more of those conversations, to teach kids, to connect with kids first, so that then we have, you know, if we're having the sex talk with our kids, we're having the drug talk with our kids, we should have the suicide talk with our kids, just like that, because it is a health concern that they should know about. And so the one piece I just wanted to add to everything that was already said is that in helping with that mindset change of so that kids are really seeing things, seeing themselves as, you know, understanding their identity and how it should be, one of the things that I teach a lot of is self-compassion. And that actually also answers that question of how do you feel like you're enough if you know, how do you get that sense of enoughness from inside personally? Kristen Neff is the researcher, the foremost researcher on self-compassion, and she has several books on it and websites, and it really is teaching you permission to be human and permission to be falling short and not to compare ourselves in that way. So that's just kind of what I would recommend, is if we can learn to be self-compassionate ourselves as adults, and then we teach that so that then as the parents, our voices become the voices in our kids' heads as they grow up. So we adopt it ourselves, and again, have that as the tone in our home, then that's what, when they grow up, they will end up not struggling with these things quite the same way as we've seen it now.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you guys for coming today. Another round of applause for our speakers. And before we wrap up, please put the next dates on your calendar, the 21st and the 5th. If you have not, will you scan the QR right now? Make the promise to live. The promise is a promise to reach out for help. Whether or not you're currently struggling, we need each of you right now. Can we do this together? If you haven't done it, I'm going to say this. Raise your hand up with me and say, I promise that if I ever find myself in a dark place, that I will reach out for help. Could be a friend, a family member, trusted resource, or 988. You guys make that promise? I promise, I promise, I promise. Thank you so much. Do that online. Mark your calendar. If you want to support our mission and donate $9.88 a month to help us get that out there, please do that. We could use your support. Thanks again, and we'll see you back here next month.